Welcome back to the Innovative Accountant Podcast. I'm Tim Coquell, your host, and we have a special edition for you today. We're going to be speaking about family office models, high net worth, ultra high net worth. Everybody in the professional space seems to be trying to deal with less clients and bigger clients. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how that's evolved in Canada today. We're going to be talking about family office models. We're going to be talking about peer support opportunities, intergenerational wealth transfer, and we've got a very special guest with us today, Allison Maher, joining us from Calgary, Alberta. Welcome to the show, Allison.
Thanks, Jim. Nice to see you.
Yeah, it's been a little while. We're fellow KPMG alumni, and nice to have you on the show.
Awesome.
What I thought I'd do, Allison, is maybe just take a few minutes for our accounting audience to introduce you a little bit, talk a little bit about why you're the perfect person to have talking about this topic today. So, Allison, you're the founder of Family Wealth Coach in Calgary, and you've had over 20 years of experience as a chartered accountant, a financial planner, a trust and estate practitioner, making impact with the families you counsel. You've become the Chief Legacy Officer for many Canadian families and their businesses, specializing in working with multi-generational family offices, family businesses, and high net worth individuals with a focus on estate, insurance, and succession planning. You've got too many professional designations to sort of share.
But not as much as the other people in my family. Just so you know, I'm the least educated. So it's a bit of a contest.
Oh, is it? Well, the business card is pretty jam-packed. You've done pretty well. And you know what? I always think the experience is what counts the most, and you've clearly had lots of that. It shows in all of the volunteer opportunities, the director positions, the chair positions, director of Surge Energy, director and audit committee member of the Calgary Health Foundation, trustee for Seidel's Donor Advised Fund, chair of Calgary's Tiger 21 chapter, past chair of the Alberta Business Family Institute Advisory Board, being recognized as top 40 under 40, sought after speaker, co-author. What haven't you done?
Well, I there's a few things on my list. In fact, my kids sat down with me the other day because we were trying to talk about universities for them. And they're like, Mom, we think you should get your PhD. You're the only person in your family who hasn't got your PhD. My dad's got two. And I know exactly what I would do it in. And they're like, well, let's just see who gets their PhD done first, Mom. Us or you? And I'm like, okay, bring it on. So there is a PhD in my future. I just might do it in my 60s.
That's awesome. Love it. And, we didn't mention the most important thing of all is you're a mother of two active boys, Joshua and Jacob, 16 and 14. And I understand they're at the heart and soul of the work you do. And, I guess the first thing I'd just say is I don't know how you balance all this. How have you had, how do you balance the personal life? How do you balance all of your career and the amazing things that you've done?
Well, I don't like the word balance. I don't balance, Tim. I'm all in. And I do, it's the transitions that are probably the bumpier bits when you're going from work to home or home to work, or trying to figure out how to get ready for that emergency board meeting in the middle of a hockey game, right? Like you're like, how do I stay present? How do I give what I need to give? I've given up trying to balance. I just try and be as present as I can be in the moment that I can be, and stay on top of the wave. If there's like a surfing analogy or a swimming analogy, just try and I do fall below, and sleep is my thing. If I don't get enough sleep, I definitely go below the water.
Very important.
Yeah, very important to me in particular. And I know that you can't balance. Like I can't. I struggle to deal with sometimes kids in the middle of the day if there's an emergency, because I'm in a board meeting. And I remember sitting in a board meeting one day, and my phone rang like 3 times in succession. And I just like, finally I looked down, and it was the kids' school, and my son had fallen in school, and I just got up. I said, I have to go, and I left, and everybody understood. But it's one of those things, it's not easy to do, and you're always trying to figure out how to be present, and then there's little distractors that come, and I'm totally imperfect, Tim. It's an imperfect process. Embrace your imperfection and do all you can do.
I love that. I think I love the all in comment. I think that that's shows up in everything that you've done and the success you've had. So congratulations on that. Obviously, your family's had a lot of success, and you're building kids in the same direction. How do you coach them on balance and or all in and creating that drive, but still, having the right priorities? How do you help them do that?
Well, we have a lot of conversations about what they're passionate about. Like my son, I didn't want my son to play hockey because I'm not really, I've broken my nose 3 times. And I thought I would like to keep his nose intact. Yeah. And and we did soccer, and we were trying to do soccer, and I thought, that has all the attributes. And as a mom, I was like, great, soccer, let's do soccer. And he just decided one day, he came home, I'm going to learn to skate, Mom. I want to do hockey. And I was like, really? It's cold in there, And I was trying to not discourage him, but I was, saying, look how great the soccer pitch looks, right? And look at the indoor thing, and he just. He said, "No, Mom, I want to play hockey," and he just went for it. He did 3 skating sessions himself, like to get his skating back to back when he was like 7 or 8. He just was like, "I'm going to do it," and I figured out how to do it, Mom. And you know what? It's been wonderful to watch him, and he's not as strong a skater as everyone else because he did start later. So he's a goalie. And he's really played to that. He's great. It's interesting because he wasn't a great skater, but he's playing to his strengths of hand-eye coordination, and it's beautiful to watch him. And it's totally his thing. And he loves the locker room as much as the rink, and it's beautiful to watch. And it's been hard during COVID not to see him do that, but. So that's how I supported him, and like I did try and coach him out of it, but he was like no, and I was like, okay, I've got to stop with the soccer, and just
Found his own path.
Embrace the goalie path.
Yeah, my son was a goalie for 1 year and went back to being a player, and I must admit I was pretty happy about that because being a goalie parent is not easy.
Hard. It's really hard when someone's just trying to shoot pucks at your kid.
Yeah.
And when you lose, that's the last line of defense, right? You just want to hug them, and you can't. You have to sit back and watch that. And but he does very well with it, so it's fun to watch. And my other son, it's been an interesting transition for him, and I love it. Things have been too easy for him because he's quite bright, and during COVID, and then he transferred to Western and full IB program, he started to fail like he was doing, and he failed very quickly. And I love it when he failed fast and he recovered quickly. So it was great to watch. It was actually, awesome. It was like, because I'm all about failing's okay. It's if you're gonna fail fast and pivot.
Yeah, love that. So obviously successful boys and following their path, values, we're going to talk about that as we get into, multi-generational discussions. And obviously in your own family, there's a lot of drive and a lot of motivation, and talk about your values that you have and how you sort of work with, because you do that for a living in a lot of respects, but you're also doing that on the personal front. So yeah, talk a little bit about your values.
And values work is hard to do, to try and figure out what you stand for. I think intrinsically people know when they're on the right path and it feels good, and they can't necessarily put words to it as to what it is. And I started just because for my values, but also for the work we do with families, you really have to understand what the family values and what makes them tick in order to really serve them well, right? And I started with the experiments of the values cards of, and a lot of them are hyper values of honesty and stewardship and empathy, or, like values that almost everyone has. I call them hyper values, the table stakes of values, right? Mm-hmm. But the decisions that families make and the path that I've chosen is based on more personalized values. And so Tom, my partner, who's been, I would call him our co-founder of Family Wealth Coach too. I wouldn't take the sole title of founder. We really experimented a lot, and I'm grateful because that's been my whole career, is just experimentation. And I've had some families that have been guinea pigs, and we did some really cool exercises with them to try and understand what are their core values and how could we put words to them. And so we take people through timelines of their life and we ask them to tell us stories. And then we drill down and we try and listen for themes. And it's all about really actively listening and understanding kind of the vibrancy of when they're speaking about something, or the softness. And we kind of test the highs and lows of people's lives, because at the highs of their lives, everything is ticking and going along, and you know you're in concert with your values. When the wheels have fallen off the bus, you know that something is inconsistent with your values. And so, and Tom did mine, and I did Tom's, and we've done that. And I think one of the things that is one of my core values is what's possible, not probable. And I think as a woman in financial services, there's not a whole lot of women in doing what I do. And you really have to think about what's possible. If I could have done what was probable, I wouldn't be self-employed. I wouldn't have built up the firm that I built up. I wouldn't have experimented as much as I had. I wouldn't have taken on some roles that I thought, oh, I don't know if I'm well suited for that. Or, I just thought, let me try this and see what's possible. And so I've kind of lived my life behind that core value. And I have a few other ones, and
I like that.
Yeah, but that's probably one that sings through for me. And it's nice that I can actually articulate it. I couldn't put words to it before.
I think that's really cool. Obviously with a financial background and accounting background, you focus a lot on probabilities and numbers and how, the analytics of decisions, and sometimes you shut off that creative side of what's possible. And I think that that's a beautiful way to reflect that value. And so let's go back to the beginning a little bit. So your career's moved in a lot of, similar path. I've followed you. You were moved from accounting to wealth management. You were a number of years ahead of me at KPMG, and I followed a similar path. But I'd love to hear and share with our audience a little bit about, why accounting when you started, and then what drove you to sort of move away from some of the accounting work you're doing to really deal more with families and their planning and the work that was there. To talk about that a little bit.
I've always been interested in business, but I was good at a few things, and so I got a full science scholarship at university, and it was women in science and engineering, and I thought, oh, I could do sciences, and there's a lot of doctors in our family, and I thought, oh, I could do this, and I did 2 years of sciences, and I thought I was going to die. And my dad at the time, I will say this, was the dean of the business faculty. So I tried to stay away from it, right?
Yeah,
I skirted it, right? And we didn't have a whole lot of capital and resources for me to go away to university and all that kind of stuff. And so U of C was my primary choice. And I thought, could I go into business? Could I do it? And I did. But I did it I can tell you, with a baseball cap, and I sat at the back of the class because whenever they got to my last name and they said Allison, I could tell they would do Allison Maher, and then they would look up because they knew the dean's name, and they would single me out. They're like, and right in the middle of a 300 person something, they'd be like, huh. And so I did try and hide, and of course it was crazy because at the time all this stuff about privacy has come in. My dad knew my marks before I did. He'd be like, "You're not on my dean's list. Where are you?" What? So it was fun. So I did do business, and then to be honest, I'll tell you the reason I went into accounting is because I wanted to get a job. So employment was hard in the years that I graduated. It was around 92, 93. In that zone, and I wanted a job, and finance jobs were tough to get, and marketing jobs even less so. So I thought, I'll get a skill, because I knew that accounting would always be a backstop, and it always has been for me.
Yeah.
I can read a set of financial statements like they're a novel, right? It's a skill that everyone can use at any point in time in their lives, right? Whether you're volunteering on something, or working for a client, or even on my own stuff. And so I did that, and then I got offered the summer student job at KPMG, and I will say this about KPMG and some of the other firms: it's an amazing community of incredibly bright human beings, and it was a gift to be able to work there and bond and bridge with so many amazing people that we can call each other up at any time. It's like we've been through hell together, right?
Yeah, for
Because
sure.
as you try and do your CA exams, and when I did it, it was just the two main exams. It's a lot of pressure. Uh, you need a lot of support, and I'm grateful. Like a lot of the people that I knew then, I still know, and it's a great community. And I then went into tax, and I thought, okay, I need a skill. I want to continue to have a skill. I wanted to try and sharpen my own pencil, and I didn't love audit. I can tell you that. Like I can remember doing an audit of a hotel, and I remember just thinking, this is just a grind. Like there's no value I'm providing. This is just, and this is the time when you actually audited. Like there was no system stuff. There was no data dumps. And you were lucky to get a printer, right?
Yeah.
And we were working in a hotel room. Like you had 5 students working in a little hotel room with very little desks and awful chairs, and and they didn't want us. Nobody welcomes the auditor, right? It's kind of like, stick them over there, right?
Yeah.
So you don't really feel wanted, and you don't really feel like you're adding a lot of value. And I remember just crying as I went home one night along Glenmore Trail, thinking, what am I doing with my career? And I went back the next day and I talked to my senior on the job, and he was just like, this will pass. You just have to go through this. And he was a couple of years ahead of me, and you know what? I'm really grateful for that experience. And you get through it. I am chair of an audit committee now, actually, and I'm on a few audit committees. So I appreciate the learnings that went on in those years, and the building. It was building blocks to something greater.
Yeah, for sure.
It's my experience was not a lot different than your own. Summer student KPMG, moved into tax as quickly as humanly possible, and and I think in some of those large firms, right, like you're dealing with large corporate clients, the audit experience and in working with mid-sized firms and smaller accounting firms, I think is a lot different. They're actually dealing more one-on-one with the client. And I know for me, that's what sort of drove me to tax and then ultimately into the wealth space. So talk about that. I'm assuming your draw was to deal more with people.
It was, for sure. Instead of doing large transaction work and audit work, it was for sure to deal more with people. And KPMG was experimenting with a wealth group at the time and trying to figure out what they could offer. And then they actually walked away from it. So I was still kind of just doing primarily tax stuff. But I really was interested. I did my financial planning designation, my securities courses at KPMG after I did my in-depth, and then I wanted to do something different. So I went and worked for one high net worth individual who was kind of buying and selling a lot of stuff. He bought a hockey team, and I helped build an arena, and I did all kinds of interesting stuff. But he was
cool.
And I don't want to say too much, but he was a challenging individual, as sometimes people are that are exceptional individuals. It's challenging to work with them and for them, but I did it for a couple of years. And I thought, okay, wait a second. I want to go back. There was a lot of things that I liked about my time at KPMG, but I didn't want to be beholden to one family. I still don't want to be beholden to one family, because I like to speak my mind, and I like to be able to have the power to leave and do my own thing. And at the time, Great West Life was hiring, and London Life is now, it's all Canada Life now, but they were hiring, and they were creating this elite group of advisors, kind of half lawyers, half accountants, all that had a tax specialty to provide value to all the other financial advisors in Alberta and BC and Saskatchewan at the time, when these financial advisors were in over their head and couldn't understand the technical or the complexity of family trusts, right, or share structures, or understand the capital gains tax issues. And so these advisors were really good with people and really understood insurance products, but they couldn't overlay that into a planning or even speak to the client's advisors in a language that could be understood. And so they created this kind of elite group, and in fact, we all just got together about 2 weeks ago in Montreal, and I've left that group like 20 years ago, and we're all still really good friends still. And it was an amazing experience. I learned a lot. What I learned there was how financial advisors really interact with their clients, how they serve them, different ways of selling, how to work with in a very collaborative way all the advisors around the table, whether it's tax, lawyers, accountants, investment advisors. And so you had to become very collaborative because I was invited into those situations. Those were not my clients. I had to earn my keep, right? I had to show value and have an impact. So it was a really good training grounds, and I did that for 10 years. And eventually I thought, wait a second, I can do this on my own, right?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So was that the start then of Family Wealth Coach?
That was the beginning of Family Wealth Coach. I had been offered a few jobs along the way, and I thought, I think I want to try this. And I always thought I can always get a job, because when you have a CPA or a CA and you have in-depth tax course, and you can always get a job, right? Mm-hmm. And that's very empowering to try and experiment, right? You can always fall back on that, but it allowed me to kind of propel myself into self-employment and start the firm. And Tom Sorge, who's an amazing business partner, said, hey, I want to do it with you. And I said, oh, okay, and we worked together for a long time before that on joint cases and things like that. I said, I think that could work. And why wouldn't we try? And yeah. I had, at the time, 2 families that stood up that I'd done quite a bit of work for, saying, hey, could you help us in a family office capacity? And I said, I think I can. And did a lot of conversations with them. How could I help them? What would they need? And so, the day that I started the firm, I already had 2 families that I was doing work for, and they were my guinea pigs. They were amazing families, and I experimented with them. Those are the families that I did my first family meetings for, and I practiced some of my different tools that we use now. I have a very pronounced or very particular intake process now. It wasn't that at the beginning. It was like, how can I deal with this? And how do I embrace the kids? And how do I hear what's important to them? And how do I make sure I serve the whole family? And who is my client? And, how best to serve them, really, right? And what people say they need is not always what they need.
Right.
And so I was trying to figure out what that was, and eventually I've ebbed and flowed. I've had always between 4 and 5 families now. I won't take on any more.
Oh, yeah.
I get asked, and I will do bits of pieces of work for some families. I will come in and help on some governance issues or help with a large decision that they're making. But I don't have a lot of capacity. As you know, Tim, it's a high touch area, mm-hmm. Family office work, and it's 24/7. Mm-hmm. It's, families are continuously, and especially when you're dealing with dynamic families, multigenerational, there's always stuff going on. There's always decisions to be made. They're vibrantly living their lives, and we, as in the family office world, you need to serve them and help the resources fuel their lives, right? And so we're supporting them to live their best lives. And how do you do that? It can be everything to reviewing some tax returns to make sure they reflect, things like that. I mean, that's just something I've got on my desk right now. Yeah. It can be setting up trusts for some of these investments that they think are really going to fly. It can be managing estate issues. It can be managing dementia issues. Because I've got a few clients with dementia issues, and the kids are struggling with how do we take over some of these decisions from mom or dad. Mm-hmm. And how do we support mom or dad, and what do your parents need from you, and what do you need to do for your parents? Like, those are some of the conversations I have with my family office clients. So anyway,
yeah, they're not always about numbers and dollars, and you've got to be comfortable moving into those some of those more softer and emotional and challenging issues.
And Tim, the one thing I will say is, I think, because one of the things you would ask me is if there's any advice I would have on how to serve families, recognize that everyone is imperfect, and it's all a journey, and you can only do what you can do in the space you've got, and you need to be vulnerable yourself in order to bring out the vulnerability in your families, right? So if they really want them to connect with you and figure out what's really keeping them up at night, you have to try and really connect with the families that you work with. And I do that all the time, and I am entirely imperfect, and I embrace my imperfections. And I would tell you, the families that I work with, they know me as well as I know them. And yeah.
I love that. I think they're looking to you for leadership. And I think, as you say, vulnerability and being real is probably one of the biggest things in terms of being a leader. And I love hearing that's how you approach your clients, because a lot of professionals they want to keep their side separate, and they just often don't want to get into some of those more emotional issues. They want to keep it at a higher level and more of a technical or a financial level. And I agree. I think unless you're willing to go into some of those places, it's really hard to, especially in the family office space, make that work. So you talked about Tom, you talked about family office. I mean, going to your website and knowing what you do as a business, there's lots of different things your company does. So family office services, family governance facilitation, we're talking a little bit about that, insurance planning, succession and estate planning, group benefits. You've really rounded out an amazing company and practice there, Allison. Talk about your team and how have you grown? You and Tom started it. How do you help clients with all of those types of services and sort of integrate that? Are you working with a lot of professionals? Do you have a lot of people on your team? What's the strategy there?
Yeah, so we keep it quite small, like remote, 7, 8 people max. We rely a lot on folks we work with. So there's a few lawyers that I do quite a bit of work with, and they help me draft shareholders agreements, they help me draft trusts, wills, personal directives, powers of attorney. There's a handful of lawyers, and I work a lot with accounting firms. So we don't do any accounting work. I do a ton of work with PwC, KPMG, M&P, and they've got lots of depth. So, there's this November thing about capital gains exemptions coming up, and, they're doing the valuation work. I'm just making sure that the transactions are happening, and that clients are aware of that rule change, or that before it gets closed up, and so that people are taking advantage of things, and coordinating the different pieces of it that need to be done. And so we have a very large virtual team, but we have a very small in-house team. And we're blessed. I've got some great people that have been with us for quite a while. And one lady, it took me 10 years to hire her. I wooed her for 10 years, and she finally has come over, and she's like, I should have done this a long time ago. I'm like, I know. So our staff are like family too. And they, not everybody does everything. Like Tom and I tend to wear a lot of hats, but our staff don't. So, we have one person that does a lot of underwriting for our life insurance stuff. We have another person that manages my peer-to-peer group, another person that manages some of the family office stuff and some of the administrative stuff around that. So, it depends, depending on the work we're doing and all that kind of stuff. And the board work that I do is really just on me, right? You can't really delegate that. You've been invited to that chair because of what you bring to the table. So it's not something you can delegate down. So it's yeah.
So that it's exciting to hear the growth, 7 to 8. I keeping it tight. I love that. Failing forward. You talked about practicing on your beginning clients and learning yourself and sort of applying the skills you already had to develop a unique client experience. And then obviously as you start to add team, process becomes really important. So let's talk about your unique process and how you've sort of been able to scale and deliver a consistent client experience with your team. I noticed that you refer to it as the legacy wealth optimization system. Share a little bit of that with us and what you're doing there that's unique.
Sure, Tim. And you know what? For that, I will also give a shout out to the Legacy Group in Boston. Tom and I before we became like Family Wealth Coach, we were a part of a study group, and we would go down. Actually meet in Chicago. It's out of Boston, but we'd meet in Chicago, and every quarter we'd go down and we'd learn from some very progressive advisors down in the U.S. and we'd try and figure out what is it, how can we best serve, what tools could we use, how could we frame different conversations, how could we listen better, and how could we hone our skills as advisors to help people think longer term, to have more resilient estate plans. Like, there was always a goal in mind, we just didn't know how to get there. But we were curious, really curious. And this group, there was about 12 of us. And so it's the same group that wrote the book. So I won't say I'm a co-author. We all contributed to the book. And the book helped us frame our thinking around things. And we created a bit of a strategic framework to help people think through issues. And we've used it over and over and over again. And then we've just perfected and honed the intake tools. So we have a lot of, I call it discovery tools. So I have questionnaires if you're, depending on whether you're involved in a family business or whether it's about philanthropy or whether it's about your legacy plan or your estate plan. We have different intake tools, and everybody is different. Everybody likes to kind of plug and play with us slightly differently. And so we have to try and figure out, because I'll say this, Tim, not everybody knows what they want us to do for them. They know that their estate plan is imperfect. They know that they don't have a plan, or things are chaos. They know the problems, but they don't know the solutions. And so a lot of the work we do is trying to help people think through things, or take some space in their very busy lives to shine a light on it, and so that they can maybe find the solutions. So that's why we call ourselves coaches as opposed to advisors. So we're not there to tell you what the answer is. We have to help you kind of peel back the onion enough so you can find it and you can embrace it. And some of that is through like the book, The Future of You. We wrote it because we wanted to have our thinking down, and it's kind of almost like a precursor. If you want to work with us and you want to figure out how we're going to help you think and some of the questions we're going to ask you, it's like a teaser. And so you can get an idea of the work we will do with you, and it will start you on a certain path of thinking about things. And some people, they need to read the book, then they need to hire us. Some people, they've hired us and then they read the book. It's a complement of really the work we do.
So the book that you referenced, that's The Future View. That's the book, The Future View, Providing Clarity Where Life Intersects Wealth. Just wanted to make sure our listeners understand that book and go track it down. Great book. Obviously, you share that with your clients as part of your process. You go through an extensive discovery process and help them really clarify their path. I love the comment on, your coaches, not advisors. I think that's what's missing in professional services today, especially in the accounting side. We're, as accountants, we were taught to solve problems, and we're often selling time by the hour. And so we feel we need to be very efficient with clients. And what that ends up being is, as soon as we get a hold of a problem, here's the solution. And in my experience, I think that learning process is really what gets clients to take action. If you're helping coach them and they're going through an experience where they learn about the whys and, optionality and some flexibility on how they may be able to solve the problems, I find they take action much quicker. And I'm assuming that you find the same thing in your experience.
Yeah, and it's more resilient. They'll stick with it, Tim. And I can hold them to it because I can remind them of that conversation. And part of our intake process is we often do a family meeting, right? And I just want to see the chemistry of people together. I want to see how much space the parents give the kids to speak or make decisions. I want to understand the relationship. What does the sibling partnership look like? Is it like this? Is it like this? Is it like this? Because parents sometimes, how do I say this delicately? They're not quite aware that their children have grown up, right? Mm-hmm. And that they have their own relationships with their families, and they have their own families, right? And so part of it is part of our intake is to facilitate a family meeting. And we do some really cool exercises in that. We do some exploratory things. We do some teamwork things in it. And this is me. I'm an accountant, right? But I found that if you can't, like, how can I help a client decide what their estate plan should look like if I don't know who the cast of character is and how they behave together and can they work together? Like, it's a silly thing, but I often ask families, I ask the mom and dad, so what decisions have your kids made together on their own without your input? Like, has there been anything when you think back of over the years, and these are kids that are like 50 years old, right? And what have they ever, have you ever just said, okay, you guys let us know what you decide, and created a framework where you force them to work together, and they're like, no, maybe they chose a holiday, or well, we did make that one gift to the, United Way one year, and everybody was on side. I'm like, well, was that their decision, or were they on side? Like, and yet they want to create a trust where they all have to work together, and they all have to be three trustees or something, right? I'm like, you're creating this structural framework that's going to exist after you're gone, but you have nothing. There's been no practice field. There's been no mentorship. There's been no experiments to see if this will work. So it's interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that's segueing a little bit. Let's talk about that governance, that family dynamic, because I think professionals, accountants often struggle with how to integrate the next generation. And sometimes their clients generationally, if they're the older, they're in their 60s or 70s, a lot of that is often set up to be sort of more private, and we keep that stuff close. And so how do you start opening up conversations with the parents in terms of including their children, and when's the right time, and how do you create an environment of safety that both sides of that are comfortable with? Talk about your experience in that regard and some of the things you do to create that connection.
Tim, a lot of it has to do with how you set the table before you even enter the room. So you have to ask permission to have these conversations, and you have to create the space to have it, and you have to understand where privacy is protected, and what will be shared and what will not be. So you really have to. So before we work with a family, we almost always interview the next generation. I send the kids an introductory letter saying, your parents have asked us to do some work for them on their estate plan. We'd be really keen to have a conversation with you before we even start working with your parents. And this conversation is entirely private, and we have an intake questionnaire that we send them in advance. And
when you say entirely private, you mean you're going to keep that between you and the child?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're not often children. Like we've done kids as young as 12, but they're often adult. We call them adult children, or G2 or G3 or Generation 4 or however. And that's the secret of it is that asking for permission, making sure it's a safe space, and we don't record meetings. I know you're recording today, and nothing gets recorded, and their questionnaire is their questionnaire, and we have this very open dialogue. What do you need from your parents? What do your parents need from you? If you had endless resources, what would be how would that fuel your life, or how would that be? Sometimes it's a burden, right? And they don't want to be involved, and they want the level of independence. You don't know what will come out of the conversation, but it's how you frame the conversation before you enter the conversation. Right. That's a lot about how to create the space, and simple things like having an agenda for the meeting and making sure they have the agenda in advance. And so we do some intake stuff before we have that conversation too. So they've filled out our questionnaire. We've kind of looked inside the box to see where the kids are at, kind of from a temperature standpoint. We encourage people to use a lot of the white space in our questionnaire to put thoughts or just streams of consciousness. We're trying to just get thoughts and feelings and ideas, and So we encourage people to use all the white space. We also do a Colby test on everybody before we take we intake them. And Colby's, with Kathy Colby's test, it's how you like to act. It's a conative test, and so the way we overlay that is how you like to make decisions. How much risk can you handle? Are you very analytical? Do you get burdened by too much data and you get paralyzed? How's your follow through, right? Because we want to know if you make a decision, then are you actually going to get it done, right? And so we test everybody in the family, their Colbys, and we also test the key advisors, whether that's family office or whether that's outside advisors. And we create a kind of a team profile to understand, okay, who's got what skills, how do people, where are they comfortable? We also do a complexity threshold and a risk tolerance thing. So we have a few different intake tools that we use before we even have that initial meeting. So we usually block off 2.5 hours. So we create a lot of space. If we don't use it, that's fine. But we give people a lot of space. We try and do it in a comfortable environment, wherever they're most comfortable. It's certainly not in mom and dad's boardroom, right?
Yeah.
And if the same way you're creating enough space for me to kind of speak my mind today is just, it's a unique conversation, and that's the first step of doing it. And then we do those meetings. Usually I try and do all the meetings with all the key advisors, all the kids, before I even meet with mom and dad. So I can then frame the questions that I ask mom and dad based on the intel that I've gathered. And I'm not breaching privacy, but I can just ask questions like, so how did that play out when you did that decision? And then I get their perspective, because I've just heard, oh my gosh, they were totally unfair. They didn't think it through. I got that from the kids, and I'm like, so tell me what was going through your mind at the time you made that decision for that share exchange, whatever it was.
Yeah, I love that. We had a podcast recently with one of my business partners, Sophie Blay, and she went through Colby and Print and a lot of these profile tools, and I think that they're so valuable. And what I enjoy most about them is the empathy that they bring for others. And I hearing you talk about that, it just makes perfect sense that in family context, we already have these preconceived ideas of what somebody's like. And then when we actually go through some of the tools like you talk about, you're going to learn something you probably didn't know. And it helps to, potentially avoid some of those conflicts that come up, because now you've got a greater understanding that this person isn't high in follow through, or maybe this one's a quick start and wants to make decisions quickly, but others need to take their time and slow down and work through that. So it's very, very cool that you guys are doing some of that work.
Yeah, you have to be a chameleon in our business. You have to serve people in the way that they are most comfortable and what they need.
So you got family dynamics. You're getting permission. You're creating that communication, that open-mindedness.
And you prime them for the conversation before you have the conversation, Tim. Sorry.
Right.
Get them thinking about it, whether it's sending them a YouTube video or sending them our book, or even our questionnaire. Even if they leave most of it blank, I can tell you that that's where I know their challenges are, and that's where I'll focus the conversation. Because if they were unable to answer a couple questions, it's because they haven't been able to think through that. So I'll focus on the questions they haven't answered.
Right. No, that's perfect. So often, you've got them now. You've identified some problems, some issues. Especially if you're dealing with business people, they want to just get going and they want to get things done because time is valuable. How do you help families think more strategically and instead of sort of tactically? What are some of the things that you do to start at a higher level and really focus on strategy as a family?
And I would say, Tim, it's easier to make tactical decisions. It's easier to stay in operational mode. It's easier to just stay in a certain mode and get stuff done, make some investment decisions. And the work that we do is hard. And you need fuel to be able to get through the hard work, and you need a framework. And so we have a certain framework, and I'm sorry, if you were here, I'd draw you a picture, but imagine a triangle. The base of the triangle is all about financial independence. So if you're not financially independent, both from a balance sheet perspective, from a cash flow perspective, from a liquidity perspective, from a creditor protection standpoint, just if you don't feel and sorry, that's just based on the facts. And then you have to feel financially independent. You have to know you're financially independent. You have to tangibly recognize you're financially independent in order to go up to the next level, which is around family legacy. So a lot of people, I think, well, my business isn't liquid. I'm not even if it's worth $1 billion, right? I can't think about transferring this business to my kids because I don't even have enough money to live off of, right? Because they're not cash flowing enough out of it, and so you really have to have a conversation. And that's the first area we work with on families, especially the first generation, to try and understand what does financial independence mean to them? What do they need for financial independence? What would make them feel secure? And how could you structure things so that it actually genuinely is financial independence? And so sometimes that means planting a second tree, taking some assets off the table, out of the family business, or it means diversifying out of some private equity stuff and creating a safer pool of capital. It also means putting it maybe in a different structure out of the opco, maybe in a holdco or a trust, or maybe in joint names or something, and then understanding how do we create cash flow of those assets. So a lot of families, they might have amazing balance sheets, but if they don't have cash flow and liquidity, it doesn't feel very good all the time, right? And so that once you are financially independent, you're empowered to try and think. It helps you, it releases you to think bigger than yourself. And so the next two layers of the triangle are family legacy and trying to define that and understand that. What is your dream for the next generation? And family can mean key employees, can be people that have been part of your, like employees for 25 years. That they could be part of your family. How you define family is up to you. Every family defines it differently. It could be the nuclear family, it could be extended family. So we have a lot of conversations around family legacy. What does that mean? How could it play out? What are you doing now? And the last tip of the triangle is what we call social capital. And social capital, by default, it's taxes. So how much are we funding our governments for? And we're Canadians. A lot of families say, you know what, I'm happy to pay my pound. I use the healthcare system. I use the road system. I'm a proud Canadian, and I believe in the values of Canada. And so that's fine. Other families, it also includes philanthropic stuff. So philanthropic could be nonprofit stuff, or it could be the traditional kind of registered charity work, or it could be being more generous in their communities. It could be paying their employees above market. It could be many different things, but trying to help people think through what is the legacy they want to create from a social capital perspective, and what does social capital mean to them. And oftentimes there's a lot of experiments you can do there, which is fun, which helps on a kind of further down the triangle too. So, but it's about trying to understand that triangle, and then trying to figure out what strategies, tactics, and tools need to work in each part of the triangle. Some do a little bit of work in 2 to 3 or 1 out of 3, but then we go tactically. So the expression that we have is we work on the why before the how. And so we have this line, this planning line. So maybe I'll use my pen. So above the line is every mission, vision, values, goals, right? The big picture things. Everything, and the framework is around financial independence, family legacy, and social capital. So what are the dreams, visions, aspirations? Only once we're clear on that picture, the why we call it, do you go below the planning horizon. You talk about strategies, tactics, tools, how, who's going to get it done, what does the team look like, and we start to create accountability on that side.
I love that framework. That's fantastic. So you take them through the why, the how. You walk them from the strategy down to the how and the tactical and the execution. Families, you said earlier that you need flexibility to make changes. And I'm assuming some of that is because even though you take them through this great process, maybe they don't take action. Or maybe the values aren't in alignment, or you're trying to protect them from making poor decisions effectively. So how do you help immunize families against poor decision making? Like, is it about the tools and the structure that does that, or do you have some other things that you do to ensure that they get to making those good decisions?
Part of the work we do is accountability, and it's not a one and done oftentimes, and we try and create a family meeting platform. So, so that you can continue to have the conversation. So, the families we work with are all incredibly dynamic. The environment is constantly changing. They're constantly changing. They're growing. They're having families. They're making big decisions. It's a continuous process, right? As you know, we've grown up, right, Tim? Like the things that we did when we were younger and the decisions we made, we might make different decisions now that we're slightly older, now that we're thinking more about our kids or our spouses, and so the resiliency comes in the constant communication, in the transparency, in the building of trust, and really treating the family like a system, and nurturing the system. Now, we don't always have. This is not just work that we do. The family needs to do it. It needs to be looked after and curated. And the kids, everybody has responsibility in the system to maintain the system, right? And so one of the things that we can do is we can do family meetings for families, and we create check-ins and updates and a way of kind of even before we go into family meeting, we'll circulate agenda items and get input from everybody to say, how could we use our time most effectively? What are the issues that you want to discuss? And then we'll try and build out an agenda that speaks to everybody. And even if it's just once a year, we get together and we talk about the strategic issues and we bring a framework to the conversation, as opposed to families playing this game of telephone tag where one sibling talks to one sibling and gets a little bit of information, and somebody gets a little bit of information from dad, and then mom goes off and speaks to only this cousin, and nobody gets the same information at the same time, and nobody can ask the clarifying questions, and so you create a framework to do it, and I think that builds resiliency, because you're constantly making changes, and you know what, you're giving your kids the space to grow up too. Because as my son reminded me, he's getting more independent. He needs to make more decisions. He's progressing in his decision making. I have to let that happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's great. Let's for the sake of time, I want to cover a few things quickly. Tiger 21. I want to talk about you're the chair of the Calgary chapter, and I want to talk about the value of an organization like that to families. We've talked about the importance of process and the right professional approach and the advisors that are sitting around the table helping support clients. But how important do you think is peers and other people in business and other families that are living and going through the same things? How does that add value? Talk a little bit about that in your experience.
So everybody's different. Everybody learns differently. Some people read by books. Some people will take advice from advisors. Some people just need to stumble through it and run their own experiments. The peer-to-peer is a layer onto that. It allows people to be a bit of a voyeur into other people's lives and see the challenges and the issues that they're facing and how they're making decisions and how that plays out. So in our group, we really build diversity. We've got lots of different generations in our group. We've got lots of different ages. We've got lots of different industries and sectors that they're invested in. We've got operating people that are focused on operating companies, people that are entirely liquid, and the conversations we have, we meet monthly. I mean, and there's a lot of peer-to-peer groups. I just happened, and I started in the tech world at Vistage, and I was a member, and so I kind of understood the value of learning from peers. And then when I got asked to chair the Tiger 21 group, I thought that was a perfect compliment, because, and I learn every meeting. I love it. I get to learn how people are struggling, what the challenges are, you know, even just what they're doing from a tactical perspective, and even how they're not making progress on some of the strategic issues, and saying something out loud to a group of people that it's important to you and that you're trying to make progress on it is one of the first steps to creating accountability on it and moving it forward, right? And so, you know, we did a really fun exercise in January. Everybody had to pick one word for 2021 as to where they wanted to move the needle, and it was amazing to see the words people picked. And now everybody's names on Zoom is their name and then their word. And it's been so much fun. And even throughout the whole year, we've asked, you know, how are you doing on that word grow? How are you doing on that word simplify? How are you doing on that word drive? And so my word was begin, because I turned 50 this year. I want to begin. And I wanted to try a few different things and in my life, and so the group challenged me in terms of, are you beginning, or are you stuck in your old ways, right? Are you trying, you know, it's been great. And so we do all kinds of really cool things. We're going to the Perimeter Institute in Waterloo next month to learn about innovation and quantum physics, totally crazy, and you know, but we want to see how the world is changing. We want to understand how Canada is in terms of innovation, and I want to fuel a conversation for the whole day about innovation. Right. And it'll be a really cool day. And then you know, each month we have a different theme. Last month the theme was growth and growth mindset, and how do you propel yourself in a pandemic from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, you know, and people were honest, like, you know, I'm struggling with this, and it's great to see that vulnerability, and I really enjoy the group.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great value. Yeah, just let's switch gears here a little bit, and you know, all of that sounds absolutely amazing and exactly what really all families are looking for. And I think the challenge of it is, you know, there's lots of experience, there's lots of advisors, and ultimately there can be lots of cost, you know, to try and deliver an experience like that. You know, I'm passionate about trying to look at ways in which we can create more of a family office model for the masses, but there are a lot of challenges with that. And I just want to, talking about the types of families, like as you define family office and the models that are there today, who does that really fit with? Like what kind of wealth, what kind of complexity? Is that even the measurement? How does that space look like in Canada today from your perspective?
Well, I think there's a quote, if you've seen one family office, you've seen one family office, right? And a lot of people start building family offices out once they've had a bit of a liquidity event. They realize, wait a second, or they want to create some space from an operating company where they've always just done everything to serve the family in the operating company. And the CFO of the operating company is just a little annoyed, like, can you get out of my office and that personal stuff? You know, and as you see people starting to take money off the table, they create holding companies, they create structures, or they have investments, right? And so sometimes it's you know, they build out family offices just from a structural standpoint to manage certain pieces of it. I would say that the family offices that really serve the families are the best ones, that are really family focused, right? Not just a support to the patriarch or someone that's just providing some services, just investment services. That's a function. That's not serving the family, right? If you're serving the family, you're taking a very holistic view of things, and you're trying to figure out what services the family office should offer. Some of those can be offered in-house, and some of them are going to be outsourced. And it's about working collaboratively together to serve the family. And you can't have, so here's the thing that I would say, you can't always have A players in your own back pocket, right? You might be able to hire, like, I right? I know like some ex-partners from some of the firms get hired solely to work for one family, and they're definitely A players. Now they're in retirement mode and very competent human beings. But at the end of the day, they can't always keep abreast of all the changes and be at the sharpest tack. And so if you want to deal, you want the brightest and best minds on a tax transaction or something like that, you're going to have to use a law firm, and you're going to have to
follow the talent.
You're going to follow the talent, and you can't hire that talent. And you don't want to hire that talent. You don't want to be in charge. You don't want that person in your backyard all the time, right? Because you're not going to be able to nurture them. You're not like just the same way you and I grew up in that environment at KPMG. It's a different environment. It's a growth environment. It's a learning environment. You're like-minded people. You want to be with a bunch of tax people, right? You can't, in a family office, create that environment, and you don't want your people to not be in that environment if you're going to deal with them from a tax perspective. And on the investment stuff, it's become a huge technology thing, right? You need a lot of technology to understand a lot of the funds and be able to evaluate them. A lot of family offices can't build that out in an economical way, even to evaluate their returns and their risk and to access some of the more international funds. You can't have that in-house anymore. You have to use a strategic advisor like a Fiera or a Seidel, or there's a lot of great firms out there, and so you just got to figure out how to work collaboratively, and it's all about collaboration. And when we grew up at KPMG, it wasn't like that. You tried to do everything at KPMG, right? And so it's a skill that I say I have had to learn how to create that, how to best serve the family. And I would say the FEA, the Family Enterprise Advisor designation, is a great one if you're looking to try and understand how to work more collaboratively and gain some skills on that. It's a great program for advisors to serve families.
Yeah, no, we're involved in the FEA program as well. Nothing but great things to say about that. And it's that family office space. I know a lot of the accounting firms are looking at that and trying to figure out how they can do more of that work. But we've been involved in Strategic Coach, and one of the great books that we read was a book that refers to who, not how. And I think that the strategic partnership is exactly that. Like oftentimes, especially as accountants, we start on the how. We're bright. We think we can figure it out. Let's figure out how we're going to do this, and we're going to do it internally. And really the first place you should start is the who. And, who are the people that get this, who understand that? And then you've got a decision to make of, do you integrate them into your organization, or do you just create some form of a strategic relationship? So totally in agreement with your comments there on how important it is to find the talent and collaborate. That's really the only way that you can sort of deliver that. So let's, in wrapping up here, I always ask my guests what books they're reading. That was another thing in Strategic Coach I loved, is sitting around in a room with 50 entrepreneurs and finding what they're reading. What are some of the books that you're interested in today?
Well, I brought a few books here, Tim, but let me just tell you one thing. I want to give a shout out to a blog that I read religiously. So if you've only got a few minutes, I love James Clear's blog. So James Clear is the guy who wrote The Atomic Habits. He's got this unbelievable blog. It's like 3 ideas, 2 quotes, and 1 question for the week. And if you only have 5 minutes, read his blog, and it always propels you in different lines of thinking and expands your mind. So that's my one plug for that. The one plug that has literally changed my career and how I help people make decisions and also understand my own decision-making biases is Daniel Kahneman's book. And everybody knows this book, I think. Mine is dog-eared and written in and marked up. And honestly, I have to reread it every year because there's just so much in it. Your experiences grow and you can appreciate different biases at different points in time. So I love this book. And there's a lot of podcasts and things around his book, Thinking Fast.
And yeah, so Thinking Fast and Slow, that's great. We've got our audio program and our videos. So for those
I'm sorry.
No, all good. Those listening to the podcast.
Thinking Fast and Slow. And then the other 2 that I will show you, one is called Nudge by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein. It's how to nudge people to make better decisions. and how to create a framework.
That seems to be a common word these days. It's starting to become mainstream.
Yeah, so it's the tagline is improving decisions about health, wealth, and happiness. And
Yeah.
it's just interesting to think about your role and how you can nudge people, right?
Cool.
And even how you ask a question will denote how they might respond. So you have that power as an advisor. And the last one that I always give away is called Try Again, Fail Better. And it's just got some amazing, inspiring quotes about failure. And I mean, I think my life is just about experimenting. And I've failed, I can tell you. I've had lots of failure. But you learn.
Yeah, the most successful people, I think, fail the most. So I agree with you entirely. That's great. Other resources. So if people want to learn more about family offices or governance, intergenerational wealth, what would you point them to? Like, is there training programs or things that they should look at? Is there other resources?
Yeah, well, we have on our website a bookshelf with different books that we give out to clients, and so there's lots of depth there. If you're a reader, and obviously all those books can be an audiobook too, so a lot of people take that in. As an accountant who's looking, if you're looking to broaden your skill sets and your experiences, I loved my corporate directors course, my Institute of Corporate Directors course. It was all about systems and making decisions as a group. And so even if you think about the boardroom, you're taking disparate people with disparate skills and you're trying to make decisions that you are all on side with, right? It's the same in a family, right? And so a lot of the skills that you learn in the corporate directors course, you can transpose into the family setting. I think the two are interchangeable. And then obviously the FEA designation and FEX has lots of good resources too, and courses and things you can sit in on nationally and then locally.
Perfect. And then if there's advisors or people, clients that want to get in touch with you or learn more about what your organization could do to help them, what's the best way to do that, Alice?
You can reach out over LinkedIn, or you can reach out just directly through email or through our website.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Well, that's a wrap here today. I want to just thank you personally for an amazing conversation and your insights. You're one of the most influential, successful businesswomen in Calgary for sure, Alberta, and even in Canada, I'd say, with what you've done. Always learn something when I talk to you, even though we're in the same space. I love your approach to what you're doing, and I wish you all the best. And thank you so much again, Allison, for your time today.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Tim. Take care.
Yeah, and on that note, that ends this edition of the Innovative Accountant Podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to us today.